Good morning, y'all. Can we do that again? Yeah? Good morning, y'all. Hi. We're a small crew, but we're mighty, right? Well, good morning again, and welcome to Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church here in Houston, Texas. I am Audrey Gale Hall. I'm your membership coordinator. I use she, they pronouns. And I have a little bit of a spiel to give before we get started. A beloved community of faith, reason, and affection welcomes all to grow in mind and spirit as together we build a better world. If you're new around here, or if you just haven't met me yet, please know that we are excited to have you here, whether you're in the sanctuary or joining online. If that is you, please take a moment to feel free to fill out a yellow visitor card, which you might find in the pew in front of you, or on the table out in the gathering place as you exit, so that we can follow up and give you more information about Emerson and our activities. Again, welcome to all. This is a church in many places. The world is a different one than it was in the 2010s, so our worship services have changed accordingly. Some of us are here in the pews, while others are joining us in cyberspace. With Harris County's current COVID threat level at yellow, we're asking people to choose what feels right for them in terms of masking and social distancing in the pews. And instead of passing the plate, we collect our offerings in baskets, right here on my right, on my left, and in the back of the room. For those of us in the sanctuary this morning, let's take a moment to visualize the dozens of friends, neighbors, and visitors who are taking part in this service through YouTube, either right now or after we post the recording. So we're bending space and time here at Emerson, yeah? For those listening at home and wherever you might be, know that we're thinking about you and that you are here with us in spirit as we move into worship mode. Imagine the beautiful sight of all the in-person churchgoers pulling out their phones, switching them to silent, and settling in for our prelude.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Ren McFadyen. My pronouns are they and their. It is a pleasure to join you virtually in Houston this morning. I am beaming in from my home, located on the traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. For thousands of years, the Mi'kmaq have lived, worked, and played in harmony with the lands and waters. Settlers who later arrived to these Atlantic shores called it Nova Scotia. Yes, through the magic of technology, I am with you today from Canada. Let us acknowledge with gratitude and respect all of the treaty lands, unceded territories, and other ancestral and traditional homelands of First Nations people all across Turtle Island. No matter where we live, we are all treaty people. About me, well, I am genderqueer, Indigenous. My family, my people are of the Mohawk Nation in Ganawake, Quebec. I am white passing and living in my 7th decade of life. I have a genetic eye condition called retinitis pigmentosa that progressively narrows the field of vision. So now, legally blind, I see the world as though peering through 2 tiny straws. I'll describe my appearance. My face is round with an angular chin, a generous nose, and brown eyes. At age 66, it's showing sun wear and wrinkles. My head is shaved intentionally. That's a Buddhist characteristic, something to discuss another day, perhaps. Today, I'm wearing a blue-green top with a multicolored stole draped around my neck. What a pleasure to be with you. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, wherever you find yourself on your life's journey, whichever your pronouns, whether you've walked in or rolled in or dialed in, whomever you love, you are welcomed here. Let us now light the chalice as we join in this time of worship together. We light a chalice in celebration of our shared community and the stories and the work of liberation that draw us on. May the flame burn with the fire of love and of commitment and passion for justice. Our opening hymn is The Lone Wild Bird, number 15 in the Gray Hymnal.
Today's story is I Am Enough by Grace Byers. Like the sun, I'm here to shine. Like the voice, I'm here to sing. Like the bird, I'm here to fly and soar high over everything. Like the trees, I'm here to grow. Like the mountains, here to stand. Like time, I'm here to be and be everything I can. Like the champ, I'm here to fight. Like the heart, I'm here to love. Like a ladder, I'm here to climb, and like the air, to rise above. Like the wind, I'm here to push. Like a rope, I'm here to pull. Like the rain, I'm here to pour and drip and fall until I'm full. Like the moon, I'm here to dream. Like the student, I'm here to learn. Like the water, here to swell. Like the fire, here to burn. Like the winner, I'm here to win. And if I don't, get up again. I know that I may sometimes cry, but even then, I'm here to try. I'm not meant to be like you. You're not meant to be like me. Sometimes we will get along, and sometimes we will disagree. I know that we don't look the same, our skin, our eyes, our hair, our frame. But that does not dictate our worth. We both have places here on earth. And in the end, we are right here to live a life of love, not fear. To help each other when it's tough, to say together, I am enough. Giving out of what is our own is a transformative act. As a community of faith, we elect an offering, not for ourselves or our congregation, but to give to others as a collective action of our community and as a way to live out our shared values. Please give with a generous heart to support our the Plate recipient, Plant It Forward. Plant It Forward empowers refugees to develop sustainable urban farming businesses throughout Houston that produce fresh, healthy food for our community. This organization secures land, trains and mentors farmers, and facilitates sales to local markets. Local UU churches are teaming up to hire a coordinator for our upcoming UU The Vote effort, encouraging people across Houston to vote. In 2020, having a coordinator was very helpful, and we hope to improve on our record in this important election year. Emerson's share is $3,000. Special donations are appreciated. Make checks out to Emerson UU Church, earmarked UU Vote Coordinator. While we are raising these funds, 25% of our Share the Plate offerings will temporarily go to this account instead of Meals on Wheels. Let's all pitch in and make this happen. We have 4 ways to give. You can text the number on the screen, go to our webpage for online giving, or you can put in our offering basket or mail the check to church.
Please find a comfortable position to be in your seat. Wiggle around if you need to. Place your feet flat on the floor if you can and if you will, so that you might feel more grounded, more connected to the earth beneath us, which nourishes and sustains us all. You can also close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so, and take a deep breath in as together we enter into a time of meditation followed by silence. In the moments when word is silence, give yourself to it in wholeness and wait. Let the knowing of this primal sound carry you into circles where sound itself, where silence itself becomes new, and the new a song you sing from your bones. Now let us enter into the silence together. Amen, and blessed be.
This reading is called Leaving Evidence by Mia Mingus. We must leave evidence, evidence that we were here, that we existed, that we survived and loved and ached. Evidence of the wholeness we never felt and the immense sense of fullness we gave to each other. Evidence of who we were, who we thought we were, who we never should have been. Evidence for each other that there are other ways to live past survival, past isolation. And now we're going to hear Leah Morris, a singer-songwriter from the Washington, D.C. area and a friend and favorite of many Unitarian Universalist congregations, perform Good Enough.
Forgive us, we're having technical difficulties. Just give us 2 minutes.
My hands are strong enough, they're strong enough, and I'm good enough. My hands are strong enough to give love. I know that my arms are long enough, they're long enough, and I'm good enough. My arms are long enough to give love. I know that my heart is wide enough, it's wide enough, I'm good enough. My heart is wide enough to give love. I know that my light is bright enough, it's bright enough, I'm good enough. My light is bright enough to give love. And my heart is wide enough to give love. I know that my arms are long enough to give love. My hands are strong enough to give love.
Her work on collective access. She explains the driving force of the movement. I'm being asked to start again. I can do that. Gotta love technology. And the questions bear repeating. What does it mean to be enough? To have choices for living a full life? To consider oneself good enough and whole? To belong and feel welcomed? To live past survival, past isolation? Well, disability justice activist Mia Mingus is known for her work on collective access. She explains the driving force of the movement, saying, we don't simply want to join the ranks of the privileged. We want to dismantle those ranks and the systems that maintain them. Collective access emphasizes how disability interacts with other aspects of an individual's identities, making disability justice activism necessarily intertwined with anti-racist, feminist, reproductive justice, queer, and prison abolitionist activism. People with disabilities make up approximately a quarter to a fifth of the United States population. 1 in 4 disabled people live in poverty. And among Black, Indigenous, and Americans of color, that number jumps to 1 in 3. Less than half as many of disabled people receive high school diplomas and bachelor's degrees as those who do not have disability. Many disabled folks can't work for fear of losing the Medicaid benefits keeping them alive. Disabled people, and especially people living at the intersection of Blackness and disability, make up roughly half of those killed by police. The COVID-19 pandemic has made our societal interdependence especially evident. And the pandemic also exposed the resurgence of eugenist thinking and policies in your country and mine. Disability advocates had to push for government orders reminding overstretched hospitals to observe the Americans with Disabilities Act, to not engage in the illegal and discriminatory rationing of ventilators and other medical equipment. Disabled people living in congregate care settings were highly and disproportionately affected by the COVID virus. As Unitarian Universalists, we must recognize that any body, any mind, any heart, any difference that is separated, excluded, is not collective access. Addressing a session at General Assembly last year, UUA President Reverend Susan Frederick Gray said this: "One of the most profound lessons of this pandemic is that we hold each other's lives in our hands. The coronavirus thrived where individual freedom took precedence over the well-being of others. It thrived along the deep-seated racism, ableism, and poverty that have long defiled our social bonds. It made the reality of our interdependence undeniable. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe in our fundamental interdependence. It is this interconnectedness that has led us throughout our history to engage in the work of justice. We know we belong to each other and to a vision of a world where all can thrive. Our Universalist ancestors called it the kingdom of God, and today we call it beloved community. The disability justice movement and ministries of equity like mine strive to ensure ensure that everybody has access to the means, not only for a decent quality of life, safety, and as much freedom from suffering as possible, but also access to political and real power and relationships with one another. Statistically, it's clear that disabled people have limited housing options, are socially and culturally ostracized, and have very limited career opportunities. These disadvantages are not due to impairment by its nature, but to a cultural aversion to impairment. It's also due to the lack of productive opportunity in the current economy for disabled people, and to the enticing multi-billion-dollar industry of nursing home institutional care, that's in air quotes, for the disabled population that evolved as a consequence of economic disenfranchisement. This argument is known as the social model of disability. It says that disablement is a political state, not a personal one, and thus it needs to be addressed as a civil rights issue. Disabled people are an example of a movement and identity whose image and capabilities are infinitely various. Karl Marx and others have shown how capitalist development has privileged certain biological forms of embodiment, for example, white, able-bodied males. Contemporary American rhetoric places a really strong emphasis on independence and self-sufficiency. The myth is that if a person is strong enough, they can pull themselves up by their bootstraps and own the American dream of a new car, a big house, and a good retirement plan, and maybe also become rich, famous, and beautiful. Independence is perhaps prized beyond all else. For disabled people, this means that our lives are automatically seen as tragically dependent. Capitalism is a form of organizing the economy. It's not too surprising that capitalism values people based on their productivity. So literally, it's the dollars and cents contribution to the economic bottom line that determines your value in society. It's a framework where some people are literally worth more than others. Ableism is defined as structural discrimination and societal prejudice against people with disabilities. It assumes that disabled people are inferior to able-bodied people and need to be fixed in some way. Ableism interacts intersectionally with other types of oppressions, such as racism, sexism, and homophobia. A disability justice lens is a framework for challenging systems of oppression. And it starts with the belief that all bodies and minds are unique, all have strengths, and all have needs. Theologies, whether they include God or not, are ways of wrestling with core questions about what it means to be human. Some theologies match the idea about productivity. For example, the prosperity gospel or prosperity theology. We see this idea that wealth is a sign that you're doing things right, a sign of God's favor. Capitalism is embedded and enmeshed in society's ableism. Disabled lives are so impacted with the idea that disabled people need to be fixed. Or maybe we just need a ramp, some large print formats, or technical aids, and then we too will be productive members of our society, because otherwise we're a drain. It's also one of the ways that internalized ableism crops up. Everyone, we're all raised, immersed in a society that proclaims these messages about our value, our lack of value. It isn't just that society judges people based on wealth and income and status and power. Some disabled people are drawn to mask their disabilities and hide parts of who they are. I'm one of the conveners of the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association chapter for disabled ministers. And having heard the experiences of many disabled ministers in our faith, I can tell you that UU ministry does not yet reflect a safe, equal field of opportunity. Many congregations simply won't consider calling a disabled minister or accommodating a disabled seminarian for internship. Historically, and still today, some disabled ministers choose not to disclose their disability and struggle without the accommodations they need. And ministers who are visibly disabled often struggle to land desirable positions with fair compensation and benefits. Their disability and needs sometimes are leveraged against them, leading to conflict and inevitable heartache. So with your livelihood, your life purpose, your self-worth questioned, it can be hard to drop the mask and allow oneself to be more real. Our UU movement is slowly awakening to these facts and seeking the guidance of those with lived experience to change systems, to recenter those most affected, and redefine views of disability. Harriet McBride Johnson wrote some touchstone words that I find embrace what it means to be disabled. She says this: the non-disabled world tells disabled people generally that our lot is unavoidably tragic. And if we're smiling through tears. And despite suffering in the face of these powerful social forces, I believe that living our strange and different lives, however we choose and manage to live them, is a contribution to the struggle. Living our lives openly and without shame is a revolutionary act. Strange and different lives. Well, I think that may be the case. Here is a characterization of some of my experiences as a person who is blind. On Monday at the grocery store, I argue with the manager for the third time about pallet loads of rock salt blocking the sidewalk to the entrance. On Tuesday, I dutifully go to the polling station to vote, and I'm told that there's no accessible ballot. The clerk suggests I bring a friend next time, oblivious to the fundamental right Canadians hold to vote secretly and independently. On Wednesday, after a long appointment in town, I phone for a taxi to take me home. The car arrives and the driver says, "I don't take dogs," referring to my guide dog. I remind him of the access laws that say my guide dog is legally permitted wherever I am. And I'm still talking as he drives away. On Thursday, I'm in a queue at the bank listening to the teller greet the people in front of me. How are you today, sir? What can I help you with, ma'am? And when I reach the counter, the teller's voice suddenly turns saccharine and slow, as though she is speaking to a toddler or a puppy. Hello, sweetheart. What do you need, honey? On Friday, I'm sipping tea at a coffee shop when a man I've never met approaches the table and announces, "You are so brave. I will pray for your eyes to be healed." I just want to vomit. So let's talk about wholeness, that we are each one of us whole, a whole person, or as Harriet Johnson says, living our lives openly and without shame. There's a story in the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Exodus. It's part of the epic tale of the Israelites getting free. And God tells Moses what they're going to have to do, what's involved with their getting free, their liberation. And it sounds a little harsh, difficult. Moses says to God, can you give me something to convince the folks that this is really what you want? And this is coming from you. Can you at least tell me your name? And God says, I am who I am. I am who I am. It's a revolutionary act. Being whole people doesn't mean that we're not changing and growing and living our lives, but it does mean that we are enough, that we are fully human. The call to disability justice is rooted deeply and compatibly in our universalism, that we are worthy of the love that's at the center of all lives. And lives are complicated. Audre Lorde reminded us that we do not lead single issue lives. We don't all get dehumanized the same way with the same tools. We're all human, but we don't all do human in the same way. Unitarian Universalists often say that we are bound up in one another's salvation, and our seventh principle speaks to the interdependent web of which we are a part. Interdependence is key to who we are theologically and historically speaking. People with disabilities tend not to have a lot of illusions about self-sufficiency. We know from our lived experience that we are all ultimately dependent on one another. No one is actually self-reliant. Moral philosopher Alistair McIntyre defined a theory of, quote, acknowledged dependence or interdependence. He argues that justice demands generosity towards one's fellow human beings, and that fundamentally to be human is to engage in caring for one another. McIntyre makes the point that those who lack this understanding, who have an illusion of self-sufficiency, are often, it's a characteristic often seen with the rich and powerful. This illusion of self-sufficiency is characteristic of able-bodied people too, who can't imagine that tomorrow they might have an accident and suddenly lose access to the structures of society they now take for granted. Throughout our denominational history, we have often failed to include disabled people within our circle of beloved community. The most egregious example of this is probably Unitarian Universalist participation in the eugenics movement of the 1920s. Our denomination continues to struggle with ableism in the present, and we must continue trying to counter this with solidarity across disabilities and across justice movements. Despite the vast range of differences that are labeled disabilities, there's a great deal of similarity in the oppression that we all experience. This is in part explained by what is called the social model of disability, emerging from the British disability rights movement of the 1970s. The social model radically relocated what is called the problem of disability, distinguishing between impairment, or the mere fact of bodily differences. Disability occurs when people with impairments are unable to access social, cultural, or physical institutions because of the discriminatory way they are designed. The social model of disability points out that two people with identical mobility impairments will have radically different levels of inclusion in society if one has access to a wheelchair and typically encounters buildings with ramps and elevators, while the other does not. While disabled people experience society-rooted discrimination, it doesn't mean we are automatically exempt from perpetuating it, or that building cross-disability solidarity is not complex. We work with competing access needs that are not necessarily our own, and we all experience internalized ableism at times. But despite these complications, we need one another to counter ableism practically, emotionally, and theologically. In 1994, a landmark book by Nancy Eiesland declared that God is disabled. And she wrote this with the force of Black liberation authors like James Cone behind her, and with the same insistence on the humanity of a community deemed less than fully human. We cannot leave anyone behind. This is how collective liberation works. One of us really, truly cannot be free without everyone. We each have a role to play to counter ableism, to ensure our congregations and churches are more accessible and welcoming. We have a role in seeking justice for the millions of people who, by virtue of some difference of body or mind, are denied the conditions of a good life. We have a role to play in bringing an anti-capitalist lens to our justice work, naming the places of brokenness in a system that values people only for what they produce for the consumer market. I'm going to close today with the words of Reverend Susan Frederick Gray. This is no time for a casual faith. This is a time for audacious love that is inextricably linked to courageous action. And this is no time to go it alone. We belong to each other, and we need one another to survive. Covenant, honoring our interconnectedness, creating more intentional and ever-widening practices of inclusive belonging. This is how we survive. May it be so, and amen. Our closing hymn is number 95 in the Gray hymnal. There is more love somewhere. It has been my privilege and the pleasure to be with you today, and it is with great affection and a sense of regret that I'm not closer with you that I leave you with these closing thoughts. Leave here, no matter where you are in the sanctuary or in your homes, knowing you are good and you are loved and you are whole. Use your light and your love to bless the world. Stay safe until we meet again.
Y'all can be seated. Thank you so much, Reverend Rin. Thank you for joining us. We're so grateful to have had you with us today. Much love, much love. I've got some announcements for y'all before we clear out. First, as usual, after the service, we have social time. So don't head home unless you really need to until you've checked out the snacks and coffee, which are now going to be in Westwood Hall, the building right across from the courtyard. Also, today is a special day. Even though Katie's away, she entrusted me with the Spirit Boost basket, and I kind of want to show you. Hold on. We have here a Spirit Boost basket. So we have a treasure hunt today, which is on for anyone who wants to participate, from kiddos to the young adults to the older adults to anyone else. So if you want to participate in this treasure hunt for beauty out in the courtyard, just see me outside. I'll hand you one of these scrolls, and then you can see me after that for the prize. Today's also an interest meeting for Emerson's new young adult group. So if you're a millennial or Zoomer, if you identify as a young adult, please feel free to join me outside at the picnic tables right after this. We might even hunt for some treasure while we're out there. Now I'm going to hand it over to Sean for our postlude.